Welcome to the Zencast. My name is Dale Pickles. I'm one of the directors at B Squared and I am the host of the Zencast. The Zencast is here as a way to help improve knowledge around SEND. There's lots of stuff we can read, but I do not have the time and most of us don't, it seems, either. And the Zencast is also a great way to get that same consistent message to schools, external professionals and parents. My guest this week is Joanna Grace. Jo is a sensory engagement inclusion specialist, as well as a doctoral researcher, hula hoop expert, and many other things. I can't even get to the end of that list. And this episode, we are discussing our senses and our mental health. How connected are they? The Zencast is created and produced by us here at B Squared. As well as this podcast, we also have our Zencast sessions, our online CPD. Jo has previously joined us in the studio to deliver a couple of sessions around autism. And if you haven't accessed a Zencast session before, they are video CPD sessions, often with the same great guests as on this podcast. There are over 100 sessions already available. We run 9 live sessions and 2 free sender briefings every year. And those paid for sessions are £10 each per school, but they are yours forever. And you can watch live on the day or watch later on. There is no limit. It's yours forever. But now, let's get on with the podcast. In this week's show, we're discussing the connection between our senses and our mental health. Discussing this topic with me is Joanna Grace. Jo is a sensory engagement and inclusion specialist, doctoral researcher, author, trainer, TEDx speaker, founder of the Sensory Projects, taxi avoider, and many other things. Joanna has worked with people with learning disabilities and neurodivergent condition aged from birth to old age. Welcome back to the show, Jo.
Thanks for having me. I always listen out for the extra thing you put into my resume.
There are so many extra bits I could throw in every time. It's great fun. I didn't realise how connected our senses are to our mental health. I knew that the more stress we got, the more we were able to filter our senses. But I didn't realise that our senses could also shut down as well.
Yeah, I think you can sort of see it in the way that we avoid sensation when we're feeling low. Like if you think of a depressed person, or if you remember like your most recent experience of depression, because I would assume everybody's had that experience, like I assume everybody's had a stomach bug type of thing. When you're in that depressive mindset, you withdraw from the world, don't you? People stay in bed, they shut the curtains, they restrict their access to sensation. And it's interesting in that it kind of goes both ways, because your response to low mood is to reduce your stimulation. But actually, if you invite stimulation, like if you try and connect with your senses, so if when you're feeling low, you were to, stand in the garden and look at a flower or touch something, or, wake up and smell the roses, that invites a connection back outwards. And you can sort of think of the depressive state as a kind of falling inwards, and a connection with the sensory world as that invitation outwards. And it's like a flow that goes in different directions. So you can see it in how we react. But it also has a very physiological response. So we know from research into depression that people who are depressed have less access to their olfactory sense. So they have less capacity to smell. And I used to, when I was delivering training, have to explain to people how important your sense of smell is, because generally it doesn't reach the kind of the higher people. You overhear people going, would you prefer to be deaf or would you prefer to be blind? I think I prefer to be deaf. It's always those two that get top billing. And your sense of smell was never really considered that important. There's a really interesting legal case in the States. You have that very litigious society, and somebody lost their sense of smell through a work accident, and the work obviously have to pay compensation. And they were in court saying, well, it's not like you've gone blind. Like, we'll give you a few thousand, but it's just your sense of smell. It doesn't matter. And their legal team demonstrated what an impact losing their sense of smell was going to have on their life. And the payout was massive, because your smell is much more important to your well-being than you appreciate. But I don't have to explain it so much anymore because our experience of COVID, most of us now know somebody who has lost their sense of smell or have been that person ourselves. And so you've got a quicker route to that understanding. But when you have a reduced sense of smell, it's your sensory system that degrades most quickly with age as well. So a lot of older people have a reduction in their capacity to smell. It affects your eating because most of your enjoyment of food comes through your smell rather than your taste. When we eat, we only taste 5 flavors. We taste sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami, that kind of marmitey, pringly flavor. All the rest of the flavors come to you through your sense of smell. And so if you lose access to them, food becomes really boring. And what you'll see in depressed people is that you tend to have a reaction to your eating that goes one of either two ways. So when you lose access to your sense of smell, your food is no longer as fulfilling at a sensory level. You're not getting from it the pleasure that you once got from it. And so some people are looking for that enjoyment that they used to get from it. And so they try and eat more because they're trying to get the thing that's missing. And so they'll get depressed and they'll overeat. And then other people, they get depressed and they no longer find the pleasure in the food because their sense of smell has dropped out on them and food is not as pleasurable. And so they don't bother. And then you get people who, undereat when they're depressed. But it's quite a common response to being depressed is a significant change in eating. And that would be linked to the change in how you're perceiving your eating through your sense of smell.
I love listening because you're literally going, no idea that happened. No idea that happened. I learned because I get migraines, and one of the things I get migraines for is I don't drink enough.
That's
so I'm going, why isn't my body telling me? And I literally, you lose your sense of thirst as you get older. I'm going, oh, okay.
I have another one to add to your list in that autistic and neurodivergent people often have differences in their interoception, which is most of your sensory systems. People know the famous 5, and on the sensory projects, I tend to run to 7. But once you start dealing in subconscious senses, it's like gateway drugs and you end up with more of them. So I'm quite often up to 9. You have 33 sets of neurons that control your senses. So arguably you've got 33 senses. But your interoceptive sensory system is a really interesting one because all the others are about sensing the world around you. And your interoceptive sense is sensing your internal world. It's the sensory system that tells you whether you're hungry, whether you're thirsty, whether you need to wee, what your heart rate is doing, all of these things. It's the sensory system that perceives your feelings. When your feelings register in your body as, like when you're stressed and your shoulder muscles are tight or you're frowning, feel that in your body. And the way in which you feel that is through your interoceptive sense. And so it's quite common for neurodivergent people to be, like if you were partially sighted, you're like interoceptively partially sighted. And so the way that you might see this reflected is with children who don't know they need to go to the toilet until they really need to go to the toilet. So it's only when it's a really bold message is their interoceptive system picking up on it. And so a message like thirst is one of those messages that you just might not notice if you have not got 20/20 interoception.
Okay, Dr. Joe.
No, yet.
I'm going to call you Dr. Joe right now.
I might be Dr. Joe.
Is this the reason that I feel that caffeine has absolutely zero effect on me?
Possibly because people who do feel the effect of caffeine will feel something like the racing of their heart rate. And if you're not picking up on that, then you won't feel it. It doesn't mean it's not happening to you.
My watch doesn't tell me it goes up, but I used to drink lots of Red Bull and and vodka and Red Bull. Not just, I wasn't a morning Red Bull person. I'm not a Monster person. It was go out, double vodka, Red Bull, lots of them all night long, go home, fall asleep.
Yeah. So here's one to add to my resume next time. I was once briefly a cheerleader for a volleyball squad.
I'm going to write that one down.
One of the volleyball players used to drink an enormous amount of Red Bull. I think he had some kind of like Red Bull induced heart attack at some point and stopped. But
that's the thing. physically, it had zero effect on me, which everyone's going, how can you drink that? I had one can, I was up all night long. It's like, how many do you have last night? 6 or 7? Wow. When did you last sleep? I went, half an hour after getting in. Really odd. But yeah, so we all know, and I always use this example of, if we think about our senses and our mental health, is driving. Driving is the one that most people can recognize. If you have your kids in the car, have you shouted because you couldn't concentrate? And it's that thing, is you're worried about what's going on, you're going somewhere new, your kids are noisy, and you're not managing to filter out that sensory input. Normally, you just let them do what they want because you're fine, you know where you're going, and you're in a happy mood. But now you're a bit lost. It's the same with when you're parking in the car park. You always turn the music down.
Yeah.
And so things like that, I've learned that when I'm busy at work, if someone's being, if something's really noisy, yeah, I've just sat down to work, I've got this really big thing, and the next door neighbour started mowing the lawn.
Yeah.
If it was on a good place, I could just filter that out. I've lost that ability.
You have a limited capacity in your mind. Everybody has a limited capacity in their mind. We all think that we're unlimited, but there's only a certain amount of stuff our brain can do. And processing sensory information takes up bandwidth. And so if you're trying to do something and you want to use as much of your brain as you can, then having less stimulation is going to help you do that. It's why we ask everybody to be quiet when we come up to the tricky roundabout, or we switch the radio off, or sometimes people close their eyes to concentrate, don't they, to think more. If you restrict access to stimulation, it helps you to not feel overwhelmed. And you can take that experience and use it as a lens to understand why autistic people who possibly are picking up more sensory information, and there's some really interesting work around autism and sight, because in general, we're quite unclear about the effect that the different wiring patterns have on the brain. But in little places, we've got pinpoints of information. So there is now I'm going to misquote science because I'm just trying to remember it on very little sleep, but is it the GABA hormone is the one that acts in non-autistic people to dampen down sensory input, and it's not active in autistic people. So you'll hear people describing, like Chris Packham describes how he sees in high definition, which means that as a naturalist, he can use that great acuity of sight to spot little patterns on the bird wings and the shape of the leaves. And, it's a strength that plays into his work. But it also means that when you see him in his house at home, he's got all the blinds drawn so that he doesn't have to do all of that seeing, because it's an enormous amount of seeing to do. And it takes up a lot of capacity. It's something that I've talked to you about before when we did the analogy between different types of televisions. I don't remember.
Yes.
If you remember that one.
I did. Yeah. No, the other one I think about is when we discussed sensory rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm a dark person. I like nice darkness, bit of music, which kind of occupies me, and just like calm every other sense down. And realizing again, that's if I'm not in a great place, I kind of, as everyone does, we retreat to our bedroom. Yeah. Either under the duvet, but then I get too hot. But it's that having that dark room. So we have blackout curtains and blackout blinds in our bedroom, just to make sure that if I do get a migraine, it's dark. But it is that thing where I've realized that getting into bed, putting on the first Harry Potter film 20 minutes in to when they arrive in London, because it's a bit flashy before that. But that is something I know and I can follow.
Yeah.
Which is calming. I get into bed, my eyes are covered, I'm just listening, and I concentrate on slowing my heart down.
Oh, can you slow your heart rate down?
Yeah, I can literally go, right, come on, just slow it down. And those things makes me feel so much better.
Yeah. When they had me hooked up to the heart monitors when I was pregnant, I was saying to my husband, watch this, look, I can control my heart rate. And he found it the freakiest thing. I thought everybody could do that. Maybe it might be just us lot. But
no idea. I've never had a conversation about heart rate before like that.
It is that there are sensory environments in which we feel at ease, and there are sensory environments that would stress us. And that's the same for everybody. But for people who perceive the world in a different way at a sensory level, what those environments are going to be is likely to be different. And if you look at the average primary school classroom, for example, it's unlikely that that is going to be the sensory environment that supports anyone. It doesn't support the teacher's well-being, does it? It's too noisy, it's too bright, it's too much going on, it's too cluttered, it's too busy. This is not an easy place to feel mentally well in.
What I find really interesting is when I travel with work, and there's a hotel I go to in Glasgow and visit schools, is when I want to sit down and work, I will go down to the foyer. I've got a lovely big foyer in this hotel, and I will set my laptop up so I can view everything.
Oh.
And so as I work, I'm looking at a boring screen, but there's like interest going on in my peripheral vision, and I can just watch and just follow things. But I have to have my noise cancelling headphones on.
Mm.
And then I put music on.
So it's like, you had a little word in there. You said, I'm just looking at a boring screen. And that reminded me of, right, try again, Joe. So the information that I share with people generally comes from the research that I read. And then I read all this research and I use my experience that you mentioned at the start, that I have neurodivergent family members. I am neurodivergent, that I've worked with disabled people in all sorts of different ways throughout my life. I use that experience as a lens to look at the research through. I don't come on and go, I had a disabled grandpa, so I know what you should do as disabled people. I'm autistic, so I know how you should support autistic people. I use that experience. So when you read a research paper and they say, oh, if you have a quiet room and this piece of equipment that costs £3,000 and 6 members of staff, then you can do. I know there's no point in talking about that research to anybody, but I pick the information that I share based on my experience, but I'm not sharing based on my experience. Mostly the information that I share when I chat to you on these podcasts is from my reading of research. Occasionally, as is coming up now, it's from my watching of dreadful television. And I was watching, and I want to put a disclaimer before I say that I watched this program, in that I was made to watch this program by an ex. So I was watching a program called My Child Genius, which I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a program in which parents with chips on their shoulder hothouse their children's education in order to prove some point about they just drill their children to like bizarre levels of mathematical ability and then compete them like they're like fighting chickens or something on this. I was pregnant at the time, and my partner really wanted our baby to be a genius, and he watched it thinking we might pick up tips on how we too could have a child genius. Unfortunately for me, we watched it and he was looking like, maybe we shouldn't do this. You're like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't. But on the series that we watched, there was a child who was a genius. So mostly you've got these hothouse children, but every once in a while. So this series had a little boy on called Thomas, and his daddy had been a brilliant scientist and had died whilst his mummy was pregnant. And his mum, bless her, she'd basically given birth to her husband in like new form. And she's like, he's so clever, I can't keep up. I don't understand the maths he's doing. He's read all the books in the house, and she's just sort of desperately trying to provide for the intelligence that he's naturally been gifted with. And they filmed him revising for the maths exam that was going to be a part of this contest. And they were on a hill up above their town, and she's sat there on like a wooden park bench in all her coats and duffel coats, and she's got the maths book of the maths questions that she sort of understands but doesn't really understand. And Thomas is hopping foot to foot in front of her, and she would read him a question, and then he'd leg it across the field and run back, answer the question, and she'd read him the next one. And the interviewers were fascinated. They were like, Thomas, this is a very unusual way to revise maths. Thomas, what do you do? How does the running help with your maths? And Thomas was like, no, the running's not anything to do with my maths. The running's nothing. The running just means that I can do my maths without my brain doing something else, because the maths isn't big enough to fill up all of my brain. And if it doesn't fill up all of my brain, then the rest of my brain will do something else. And then that might be bigger. And then I might stop doing the maths to do the other thing. But the running is about the right shape. And you think, oh, he's hit upon such a perfect analogy there, hasn't he? If you think of the brain as like a 2-litre pop bottle, It's got a capacity. If you put in a task that's very small and only fills up the bottom, the rest of that capacity is going to look for something else to do and busy itself doing something else. So that's all the being distracted at school and messing around. If you fill up the brain with a task that's too big, you're going to be overwhelmed. You're not going to be able to do it. But what he was saying was maths was like filling his brain up just to the curve of the bottle at the top. But because his brain is so keen to be completely full, if he doesn't fill the rest of it, that little bit that's left over will go looking for something else to do, and it might find something bigger than the maths, and then it would displace the maths. So what he's got to do is find the activity that just balances it, because what you're looking for is for it to be perfectly filled, and then that would be you in like a flow state of pure concentration. And what you've just described there is that you're on your laptop. You can concentrate, like your activity, your boring work on the laptop was filling up most of your brain. You can fill up the rest of it by just watching the passers-by. But if you also had to listen to them, it's too much and it's gone over. So you're looking for a kind of sensory sweet spot.
It's exactly that, because I tried sitting in that hotel room with my laptop, and I'd sit there, and I literally going and working, and I'm just looking round, going. And even my headphones, what I hear is cleaners or people walking past, and I'm distracted. Yeah. So what I've learned is I like rhythmic sounds. Yeah. So clock ticking, if it's ticking at a regular point, I don't hear it after a while. But if it's something really random, you can't kind of predict it in your head. You kind of can't really deal with that. So so I found working in a hotel room cannot do. I have to be somewhere where there is stuff going on visually, which is going, oh, what's that? And it's occupying that part of me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I need a quiet sound, because it's weird. Is my head. Yeah. It's a whole thing with my head. The way it works is I'm in my head. Sound is like, I struggle to filter sound, but I can filter. I can ignore things I see. It goes in, but I can. I love how it works, but it is going back to that sense of smell and taste and realizing, probably actually, I do think that. Well, I don't think you scientifically proven probably that actually when you're not feeling great, you are just eating for the sake of eating. And you're not enjoying it.
Yeah, you see it with old people as their sense of smell degenerates. At the same time that food loses its interest flavour-wise for them, they tend to be served plates of warm mush, and they don't even have the kind of sensory interest of different textures and things like that. The people that I've known who've lost their sense of smell through COVID, there is another sensory system that comes into the face through the trigeminal nerve, one of these like random 33 ones, that is separate from your sense of smell, that does pick up some things that we would describe as smells. And that sense acts against all the things that you would think of as being hot. So like black pepper, curry, mustard, those sorts of flavors. You might, if COVID, for example, has knocked out your sense of smell, you might still be able to get an enjoyment of food through those flavors. So you might find that somebody who's never touched curry before is suddenly big into their curries. But your thing that you were saying about the ticking clock is interesting, because with my work at the sensory projects, I'm often looking to find really wonderful sensory experiences to use within the sensory stories that I write. And when I'm creating a sensory story, I'm looking for sensory experiences that draw the attention of a sensory system, regardless of your cognition. Like they're just going to appeal to that sensory system, whether you understand that this is a part of the story, just something really just luscious that makes you want to sense it at a bodily level. I look for things that draw the attention of sensory systems, or things that fill a whole sensory system. So just something simple like looking through a piece of coloured cellophane changes everything that you see. It fills your sense of sight. But I'm also, if I'm looking to connect with people, so I've said on previous episodes that my work generally focuses on people with very profound intellectual impairment and people who have multiple co-occurring physical and sensory disabilities. And we tend to think of our sensing as being an organ-based thing. Like, if my eyes work, I can see. If my ears work, I can hear. But it's only about 25% receptor organ. it's 75% done backstage in the brain. So I have a friend whose eyes work perfectly, but she's blind because her brain doesn't understand the information that comes from her eyes. And our capacity to sense is partly based on our having of organs that can do the receiving of sensory information, but it's also based on our understanding of that information. And that understanding of information is not something we're born with, it's something we learn. And most of us learn it quite rapidly in the first few weeks of life. The only time we really respect it as a general population is when we give babies black and white picture books, because we recognize they're not at the same level of sight as us. But there is, if you want, a kind of curriculum of the senses where there's the sensory things that you can do first, like understanding black and white. And then there's the sensory things that you learn to do later on, like distinguishing between peach and lemon yellow, or all the shades of which precise shade of my sister and my brother-in-law painted their walls grey inside their house. And for a long time, they were deciding which colour grey to paint their walls. And they'd got all these swatches of grey, incredibly similar swatches, so somewhere up that end of sight, you can deal with that stuff. But I often liken that sensory curriculum to other curriculums. And I always use maths because I've studied far too much maths in my life. But it's like when you learn maths, you start off by, if I was teaching you maths, I would start you off with experiences of one and many. I'd give you like a thing, and then I'd give you lots of things. You hear of tribes who've got the counting systems 1, 2, lots. It's like that.
Yes.
Your start point with maths is to have experiences of quantity. And then after you've had experiences of quantity, I would teach you to count, because then you're beginning to understand that quantity that you've experienced. And then we'll do adding and taking away and the other sort of functions. And then somewhere down the line, we'll start doing maths that doesn't have numbers in it. If I want you to be able to do advanced algebra, I'm not going to start you out with advanced algebra. I'll start you out with experiences of one and many, and I'll step you towards it. And you're much more likely to become a person who can do advanced algebra than if I start you out there at the start. And some of the people that I work with, the sensory world that they occupy is the kind of sensory equivalent of advanced algebra to them. And so they don't have access to it because it's too complicated. And if you can simplify it, you can give access. And then obviously having access to the sensory world is having access to the world. So that's going to have a mental health benefit. But so I know this through my work with that population of people, but it's information that applies to everybody. Because just like if I were to jump out at you on the street and go, here's a piece of advanced algebra for you to do, that would be stressful for you. If I jump out at you on the street and say count to 10, that's fine. In fact, lots of people count sheep to put themselves to sleep, because doing the simple things is calming, it feels reassuring. And so actually for all of us, the sensory experiences that our sensory organs and our brain can understand and process first, those sensory experiences are the ones that we find most connective, most calming, reassuring, grounding. Those are the places. When I've done work with nurture groups, and you look to set up environments where these vulnerable young people who've been so sort of rattled by life, you want to create a room in which they feel safe and secure. And the way in which you do that is you create a room that is rich in early developmental sensory experiences. And your clock ticking is, so for with regards to sound, one of the first sounds that you would be able to process is the sound of your mother's heartbeat. And so if that clock is ticking in a way that, you were really close, there'd be a reason why that's an easy sound to deal with, whereas a more erratic sound is more like algebra.
So waves are fascinating, and waves on a beach, they come in patterns. It's not, if I literally recorded a clock ticking 5 times and then repeated it and just played that same 5 ticks again and again and again, you couldn't tell me if that was the same 5 ticks or fresh ticks.
Yes.
They always sound exactly the same. Whereas waves, they come in patterns of 3s, And those
do.
patterns of threes comes in patterns of threes. And those patterns of threes comes in patterns of threes.
Yeah, and if you're a surfer, you want to catch the second one of the set. The first one clears the bumps out of the water. The second one's usually got good power. Don't wait for the third because you don't know what it'll be.
But the 27th is generally a really big one.
Oh, right. Okay.
So if you're on the beach, you're out there in the sea. I'm watching them hit but you literally going small, big, big, small. And you see that big one that's to you the second wave, but that's my every 3 waves is this powerful one. But then after 3 of them, there's a bigger one, and after another. And you do this, and you watch people on the beach. They're walking along, and it's all fine. And suddenly, this big wave comes in, but you can actually almost count up to 27, and that's when the next. And what I like about that is, if you just close your eyes and listen, every wave is slightly different. So it is kind of predictable. There's going to be a wave, but there's also unpredictableness in it, which I quite like.
Yeah, and it's a white noise sound, the sound of waves sucking the little stones back across the beach or pulling the sand back. That rustle noise is a white noise, watery sound. And hearing becomes active in the room. So your very start points, your hearing equivalent of counting and one of many is the heartbeat of your mother and the fluids of the womb. So those sort of white noise fluid sounds are generally sounds that people find reassuring. And it's interesting, in places where I remember staying in a hotel where the generator is like in the room next door to mine, and you've got this kind of whirry white noise sound. And what you find is that people will complain about a sound like that, but fall asleep faster than they ordinarily would because it's there.
But white noise, if you're going, what's white noise, is go back to when TV programs used to end before we had digital. That's static. And if you've got a frequency analyzer, what you would notice is it covers every frequency. So white noise is very low frequency, it's every frequency. It's just covering everything, which is kind of nice. Well, I don't like it when it's just constant.
Like an auditory blanket.
But I do like it with the waves going up and down and changing. It's something slightly more interesting rather than just
you can get white noise
just constant
on your phone, can't you? A lot of people use them to help their children go to sleep at night.
And I think because it is every frequency, it can block everything else out. That's what's nice about it. If there's this noise or that noise, it will block it all out, and you just get a very blank sensory platform that it's given you. That everything, all that noises are filtered out, and it's brilliant. But it's amazing when we think of, again, filtering out senses. When you go to sleep, you close your eyes.
Yeah.
And you've filtered out the visual world, but you can't filter out the ear. You can't filter out the sound. You can't just go, I'm going to close my ears now. And what's annoying with your ears, it's magical as well. And the same with our right. When you're in the summer, you're inside the house. You step outside and you're going, geez, it's bright out here. And a minute or so later, you're fine.
Yeah.
And then you go into the house and it's pitch black. And a minute or so later, you can see fine. And as it gets darker, you'll see things. And it's amazing how much our vision and our hearing adapts. So there's amazing rooms where they've got all these noise cancelling stuff and foam and all different. They're called something chambers. That's the one. I almost said amoebic chambers, but it's probably not even a thing. But it's something we have. But if you sit in there on your own for like half an hour to an hour, your ears get more and more sensitive, more and more sensitive, more and more sensitive, and you will hear your own blood going around your veins and arteries.
Yeah. So there's like a YouTube phenomenon that's like you cannot go into an anorexic chamber and stay sane. And because people going into them have very high stress reactions, and like they panic, they pass out, they vomit. And it's something that I always come back to, because with my work with people with profound intellectual disabilities, quite often you'll notice that if you take somebody into an environment they're unfamiliar with, they become very distressed. And that's understood as it being because they're intellectually disabled, or because they've got sensory impairment, or because of, some of whatever condition we attribute this to. And it is due to a condition, and it is the condition of being human. We all react with extraordinary levels of distress when we're placed in sensory environments that we're unfamiliar with. And the difference between the people that I was talking about just then and ourselves is that quite often they've only been in very sound insulative environments. They've got wheelchairs that they ride around in that've got a lot of foam and padding. Quite often at home, their houses get very cluttered, because if you have a profound disability, it comes with a lot of cardboard boxes and packaging and things, and you can't always access all of the house. And so you're in these rooms that have got a lot of stuff in them. A lot of the stuff is sound absorbent. So you're in your own version of an anorechic chamber. And then if I take you into an echoey space, for example, I remember taking people to a cathedral, and the stress reaction was extraordinary. And you think, I've just wheeled you into, I'm not doing anything nasty to you. I've taken you out to see the cathedral, but they were really distressed by it. But that's because they're human. And then you look at people. I saw a great interview with one of the research scientists who runs one of those chambers. And he was saying, because the people who are coming into these chambers are not intellectually disabled people. These are the top minds, great researchers doing science. And they didn't come with any sort of like tag that you could make the exception. He said he was just really tired. He said, I do tell people when they come in to let me know if they feel. And he looked down and they've got a sprung floor, so they have like a wire mesh floor because the foam padding is underneath the floor as well. And he kind of cast his eyes down. He said, because it's really difficult to clean when they're sick. So we all, at every level of humanity, have an emotional, mental health response to the environments that we're in. So curating environments that are good for mental health at a sensory level is a really powerful way of promoting good mental health. And as a way of addressing mental health, looking to invite connections with the sensory world, literally to just to look at something, to touch something, and to connect with that sensation. It takes you out of your head and into your body. If you're anxious, if you're depressed, you get caught up in these thoughts, and connecting with your senses is going, you are here in the world. Obviously, you want that connection to be in a safe place. You don't want to bring somebody into your here in the world and I'm about to hit you. Then it's fine. Stay off in your head. But if you're looking to support somebody, you would invite that connection with the senses. And we're looking at this in lots of different directions. So we're looking at the environment. We're understanding that what causes stress in the environment is going to be different depending on the neurotype that you're living through, depending on the sensory capacities that you have, depending on the processing capacities that you have. There isn't an environment that is the right one. You're looking to curate them accordingly and to be able to make changes in response to people. You're also recognizing that your experience can change over time. So we were talking, so like, if I get stressed, I have to wash my perfume off because I can't handle a smell and stress at the same time. I like my perfume. Obviously, I smell lovely, but your sense of smell is unique. It's the only sense that's processed by your limbic brain. All the other senses are processed by your thalamus, your thinking brain. Your sense of smell is processed by your emotional brain. So it's a particularly emotional sense. And being stressed is emotional labor, and smelling is emotional labor. So when I'm stressed, I can't also do smelling, and I would find it difficult to be in a smell environment. And then the stuff that you were saying about interoception is the other way around, isn't it? How that sense in particular works can affect your understanding of your mental health and your ability to access the services around mental health.
What's interesting, I'm just trying to think about my sense of smell, and I do wear deodorant and I do wear stuff, but I would say I don't smell most of the time until it gets to a meal time, or I'm out somewhere like there's lots of lavender or your garden centre use. But most of the time, my nose is telling me absolutely nothing, which is really interesting when you're saying about going.
I think I take people smell walking when I do a course called Develop Your Sensory Lexiconry, and that course is taking people through the development of the sensory system. So that curriculum that I was talking about earlier, that's what that course is about, and it's what the book Sensory Being for Sensory Beings is about, just to plug that one as well. But I take people smell walking on the Lex, and that's a process that comes from a researcher called Kate McLean, where you invite people to, first of all, we do smell catching. This, you can try this at home, folks. you stand somewhere and try and shut down your other sensory system. So you close your eyes, don't chat to somebody, because we're prioritizing information from our senses a lot of the time. And we tend to prioritize our visual experience and our auditory experience. So you probably are smelling, it's just not coming through as a priority in your brain. So you stand somewhere and then you just take in the smells that come past. And what you'll find is there's kind of a background aroma to a place. And then you might catch smells that just drift past, like somebody with a perfume on walks past you and you notice it. And then you stand in a different location and do some more smell catching, and you experience a different background smell, and you catch different smell. And then you do smell hunting, where you look around, you use your other senses to find smells. So like, you know, those little air bricks that you have at the bottom of buildings, like if you bend down and sniff them, you can sniff what the inside of the building smells like. Or you break leaves on plants and smell the plants. Or quite often, the reason people say they smell stuff when they eat is because we put food under our nose, don't we? Like, well, we lift it up and we put it under our nose and into our mouth. If you lift up other things and put them under your nose, they also smell. We just don't tend to do it. So then you do some smell hunting. And yeah, we live in these very rich olfactory environments that are accessed through our sense of smell when we are when we are mentally healthy and physically healthy. But when you lose access, it affects you back the other way.
That's the thing. I was literally thinking, there are so many smells which bring me happiness.
Oh, yeah, because it's emotionally processed. It does a kind of time travel thing. If you meet a smell that's emotionally resonant to you, it will jump you back in time to the place that it links with. Yeah.
So everyone loves the smell of fresh bread.
And nobody likes the smell of hospitals.
Nobody likes the smell of hospitals. I love the smell of like garlic mussels, garlic prawns. That sort of, I love it. I can't stand either of them. But the smell, I love that. God, I love that. The seaside. Getting to the seaside, when you drive down there, you open the door, it's like, oh, that's nice. And it is. And there are just so many smells. I'm literally going, but yeah, my day-to-day life, I smell what I eat. I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to leave bodily functions out. But I smell what I eat. And occasionally you get the whiff of someone's perfume as they walk past. But apart from that, in my head, unless someone's car drives past burning oil or whatever, you generally, I would say most of the time, I never notice smells. And it's always, as you said, it's not that important. I'm not processing, which is really interesting because they can bring me so much happiness with all these things. And
if you think about the classroom, if you've got like a couple of members of staff in the classroom who are wearing strong perfumes, they are asking emotional labour of the children that they walk past. And some children will be able to do that labour and some children will struggle. You know, it's all these little things that the straws that break the camel's back.
You need to be able to sense something first, then be able to filter it.
Yeah.
In reality. So if you're only at the I can sense things and you've not got to filtering, then you've got no control over what's coming towards you.
Yeah.
Wow.
And smell's a particularly tough one. Smell's a unique sense because it's processed by the limbic brain. And then we were talking about interoception being unique because it's the sensory system that looks at your feelings. And so that one has a massive role to play in mental health, because if you can feel what you're feeling as you feel it, then you can respond to your feelings as you have them. But if you haven't got that registry, and not everybody does have, then it's much harder to regulate and modulate and respond to your feelings. And it's a really tricky one for people who do have that registry to understand, because if you're feeling happy, like, of course you know you're feeling happy because you're feeling happy, like you feel it, like, but there's a process at play in that feeling of it. So I think I can't remember if I've done this example with you before, but I'm somebody who has, I would say I'm partially sighted at an interoceptive level. So I have generally little awareness of what I'm feeling as I go through the day. I only notice emotions when they're really big. And if I was in, like if you hang out with somebody who just grates on you a bit, you probably would stop hanging out with them and hang out with somebody else. But if you don't realize that that's happening, then you would stay there until there's a bigger problem, and then you've got yourself into a bigger situation. And I live a very happy life currently, and I regularly get to speak to like twinkly-eyed people who want to change the world and make it a better place for disabled and neurodivergent people. And I have these amazing days that I never imagined would be a part of my life. And I had one of these days, I think I was talking to portage workers, because portage workers are just, they're some of the best, because they meet these children when they're so young and they can make such a difference to families early on, and they're so sparky and they can make anything out of your like old laundry bottle and a cardboard box from your cereal packet, and they go into homes and they just bring joy, and I adore them. And so I'd spent this day doing a presentation to these portage workers, and then I catch the train home, and people who see me on social media and do come and connect with me on social media, you see a lot of train journeys. I probably spend about 14, 20 hours a week on trains. I caught the train home, and when I got home, I'm worn out from the day. My husband's very kind. He loves me. He puts me on the sofa in front of my bad television that I watch. He made me dinner. And as he brought my dinner through to me, he was passing it over to me on the sofa. And I realised I didn't have hands free to take it, because I didn't have enough hands. You know, like when you get out of the car and you haven't got enough hands to get the keys. I hadn't got enough hands. And you think, that's weird, because I'm sitting on the sofa. Like, why haven't I got enough hands? and I realised that both of my hands were sort of clawing at my face, and I was kind of pulling my cheeks down. And so I thought, I probably don't need to be doing that. So I let go with one hand. I took the dinner, I balanced it on my lap, and then I went back to clawing at my own face. I wasn't really paying attention. I was watching the television, so my hands are back in my cheeks. And then I'm looking at my dinner thinking, I've got to pick the fork up and I haven't got enough hands again. And my husband was just quietly sat on the other end of the sofa, and I looked across to him, because I think I was thinking in my head, or maybe he could carry some of this stuff, because I haven't got enough hands. I wonder how much he's carrying. Let's have a look, see if he should be taking some of these bags. And he's just looking at me. He's like, okay, Jo, what are you doing? And then I looked at him, and you think, what am I doing? And I said to him, my face is too high up. And when you've been smiling so much that your face hurts, I'd had such a good day that my face was hurting from smiling, but I hadn't noticed I was happy yet. I was feeling happy, but I hadn't felt that I was feeling happy, because my interoceptive system doesn't give me that information. I have to be physically clawing my own face back down before I notice it. And you would think that somebody just has that information about themselves. And then you think how you support people's mental health, and you go, how do you feel? Do you want to talk about how you feel? Do you want to tell me about your feelings? Like, I have no idea about my feelings. How could I even begin those conversations with you? You tell me about my feelings.
I love my face is too high.
Yeah, that was I was trying to work out what was going on. My face is too high up. I'm trying to get it back down. I was just trying to pull my cheeks back down.
And if you think about how you just describe a smile, it's like, their face is high. It's almost like a really, I'm going to say childish language around it. But that's kind of it. Is I am obviously just a 21-year-old still, definitely not miles above that at all. And everything about me is my age, isn't it? No, it's a real all over the place. I know we use child or sort of developmental stages like that, but bits of me are miles down there and bits of me are miles up there and all that lot. And I think it's great when you sit there and you kind of get past trying to be that person and go, look, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm experiencing. And it just helps you sit there and go, wow, yeah, I find myself, sometimes I'll sit there going, I'm not feeling great, but I can't work out why. I'm just going, something's not right. I'm getting home in the evenings and I'm just sitting on the sofa. I'm not doing anything. Why am I not doing anything? Why am I just sitting on the sofa? But it takes me a few days to notice, well, last week I was doing this and I did this and we did this, but this week I'm just sitting on the sofa. Work's fine. Everything's fine. So why am I just, and I have to work out why, and I don't initially get the feeling, but then I'm sitting there going, my wife's going, you're right. I'm going, I don't know. I don't know. It's like zones of regulation. I'm green or whatever. I'm green. Are you green? I don't know.
Yeah. No, I couldn't.
That means I'm not green. It's that sort of thing. Because if I knew I was green, I'd say I'm green. But if I'm saying I don't know where and it's that sort of thing. So I'm now sort of going, okay, so I've now got to work out what's the cause.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's causing me to not feel great.
A lot of the ways in which we support mental health presume a neurotype and presume interoceptive capacity. And how we support mental health for people who might not fit those presumptions is a question that we should be looking to answer. It's not a question that's been answered yet. It's one that's on its way.
Now, if you don't get it, we'll just keep doing those emoji cards because that tells us our feelings.
Well, I mean, it's an odd one, but for me, one of the things that has been most helpful with regards to both my mental and physical health, because like many autistic people, my mental health through time has manifested itself in physical illness, has been my husband telling me how I'm feeling. Because I don't know, and because he's somebody who loves me very much and is very in tune with my body and with how I am. You know, like when you come in and your dog can tell that you're stressed type of thing. Like animals pick up on physical markers in your body. He's picking up on those factors in me. And he'll say to me, "You seem a bit stressed, Joe." And I'll be like, "Do I didn't know that. Oh, fine." Like, and if he said it to me like a few days running, you think, "Oh, I wonder if I am." And then I look at my to-do lists and there's 6 of them and you think, "Oh yeah, probably I am." But I have to learn that externally from him as a trusted other. I can't do it myself. And with him telling me how I'm feeling, I haven't had any illnesses as a response to not managing my emotions. But if the ask had always been, and I think I see this in schools a lot, there's often the expectation that that person will do the managing of their emotions on their own. And it's presuming a capacity that they don't necessarily have. And it's kind of not fair. It's like saying to somebody who uses a wheelchair that they have to push themselves everywhere. Like, we've got workarounds, there's ways of doing this. We could do it together. And we are a species that is a community. We're not individual, isolated people. There are always people around us. You need a way of doing these things that works sort of, what's it, interdependently rather than independently.
Yes. The thing I didn't realise, and one of my amazing guests taught me this, is the reflective part of your brain. We're able to actually sit back and look at you. Doesn't develop in a typical person till around the age of 24.
Really? Gosh.
So that like self-reflection bit, and something that is, I probably got it wrong. Somebody else going to notice this, but actually what you mean is this. But it was the idea of looking back and going, okay, yeah, I've done this. That was good. That was bad. But we try and do it in schools. We try and get children to be self-reflective, but actually what they're saying is we're trying to do it 12 years or 15 years before they can actually do it themselves. And you might find that bit typically comes at 24, and for some people it might come later or not come at all.
At 24 now, do I suddenly have an emotional epiphany?
But it's one of the things you sat there and looking back and going, actually, and for me, what was correct is I think I became a dad around 26, so wow. I attuned to becoming a lot of things I thought about was actually being very reflective of actually I'm doing this with my child, what happened to me as a child, what were my parents doing? And I became very reflective. It might have been just actually that sort of part of me hit at that point. But that being reflective is a skill that actually being able to look back. But I think being reflective and tying in those feelings is a whole other level. Mm. I think being able to sit there and look back, what did I do this week? And then actually going, when did the stress, because you can list all the things and go, well, I did all of this. But actually sitting there going, but when I started feeling bad was here. And that's the bit my feelings are generally I'm happy and life is all right. But then sometimes all of a sudden my wife goes, you're not right. Or somebody says it. Yeah. Somebody says, yeah, you weren't looking good the other day. I'm going, I thought I was fine.
Yeah. So a nice way of supporting children, and I mean supporting adults too, if you want to do it, is to tell them how you think they're feeling and tell them how you knew. Like, I think you're stressed today because you seem to be moving around more than usual. Or I think you're excited about, tomorrow because you haven't eaten much of your lunch. And if you give them, because you will be picking it up from external cues, if you can give them the external markers that you're using, then maybe they could learn to use. Like if somebody said to me, "Oh, you seem stressed because you're frowning a lot," if I go to the bathroom and look in the mirror and I notice I'm frowning, I go, oh, look, I'm frowning. I wonder if that means like what they said it means, like, or my shoulders are up around my ears. I wonder if that means, but you have these opportunities to see yourself from the outside in mirrors, like on videos, and you could consciously look and be the external observer yourself. And then you're supporting somebody's emotional understanding of themselves without it always being the conversation. How do you feel? Tell me how you feel. Can you show me on the scale what you're feeling today? Because we can't all do that.
No. That's the thing, is I find sometimes I've got something I'm thinking about, but I'm not even thinking about it right now in my head. I've not thought about it for hours upon hours. So I'm like, and I'm literally going there, going, yeah, good, I'm really good. Yeah, I'm not even thinking about it. It's literally, I'm not going to talk. But obviously, part of me is
thinking it's on
about
one of the background tracks,
and that's coming out on my face, whether I want it to or not. And that's what I find interesting, is that I'm not aware of it. The background track is running, and this person I'm talking to is seeing it, and I'm thinking I'm being really happy, and they're going, "You're right," and I'm going, "Yeah, it's twice you've asked me that." And I think that whole, we assume everyone gets their senses because they're an adult.
Yeah, and everybody senses the same way that we do. I made that assumption too. Even working as a sensory engagement specialist, I made that assumption well into my career.
Love it. Anything to add before we wrap up?
Oh, I'm sure there's loads, but no.
So, mental health, good for the senses. If you're feeling down, break a loaf of bread. I think that's what we've decided.
Wake up and smell the roses.
But yeah, it is one of those things, is senses can bring us up, bring us down.
The environment
when we are
is different for each people. Your capacity to sense affects your ability to feel your emotions as well as your wellness.
And if you can learn what brings you down, what as in calm, not sad. If you can learn what helps you calm, i.e. dark spaces, for me, that Harry Potter film, just because I know it so well, and it's such a childish, happy thing. It's lovely just to listen to. And generally, even how I'm feeling, 20 minutes and I'm asleep. So working out for you, and it can be just do this, put this
sensory
on.
Profile, sensory wellbeing profile, yeah.
And it might be having a cup of hot chocolate in a certain mug, because that mug with that smell takes you back to that time when you were a child. That's the thing. It's things like that, is finding that and remembering it and going, I need that, and going and doing it, because it can really support your mental health. And if you do, like Joanna is saying, going, maybe not quite aware you're down, or it's working out, okay, working out what's causing that, but it might take help from others.
Yeah, or working out what markers you're looking for. You have to consciously do it. If other people are just feeling it instinctively, they have a constant stream of information telling them that. If you're not somebody who has that information, you have to habituate it into your day, like the way that you learn to brush your teeth twice a day. You have to practice checking how you are as a part of your maintenance of your well-being. I am giving this advice, ladies and gentlemen, but I am not following it.
But I remember, and it was, again, I realised it's like a sensory thing or whatever it was, but my daughter used to play football. I used to be the coach. She would literally have great days, bad days. It was just, I had no idea. And then one day we were going to a football match and there was a song she liked. We turned it up in the car stereo loud and put it on 4 times in a row. She had an amazing match. I was like, okay, what? And I went, what changed? I went, music. So the next week we put that track on or a different track on, but we cranked it up. Literally, I got in the car, we turned it up, and off we went. Another great match. And it was kind of whatever she was, and it's whatever she was waking up and thinking about. By being in that music, she forgot about what was on before. Yeah. And when she got out of the car, we just had a great time with the music. And I just found that it really just having that experience in the car, sensory, emotional, whatever it was, just helped her clear out the stuff from before and start afresh that when we arrived at football. And it worked. Yeah, every other time we just did that. But I find it now that I think she's picked up on it. And when she's going somewhere, she wants to listen to music in the car. When she gets in the car from doing something, she wants to put that music on in the car. And it is just, that gives her calmness. And she'll get in the car agitated, get out of the car calm. It's phenomenal. Just so we have lots of music time together. So thank you for coming on the show today, Jo. Really enjoyed it, as always. I will try to remember to mention cheerleading in my next intro.
Thanks for having me. It was very, very brief.
Really, really enjoyed it. As always, follow us on the social medias, on X. Just don't like that name. We're at The Sencast. On Facebook, The Sencast. Instagram, The Sencast. And wherever you listen to us, if you can leave a review, please do, so everyone else knows how amazing my guests are, because they are all amazing and teach me so much. And before we go, I'm just going to remind you to check out Sencast Sessions. If you love listening to Jo and want to watch Jo, you can go and have a look at her sessions. So she's done one on autism, neurotype and behavior. It's already happened, so you can't watch it live, but that session is there forever. So you can buy it for £10 and it is yours to watch forever, as much as you want. You can have a Jo fix every day if you need it. So have a look on the Sencast website. You'll see all our sessions. I think there's well over 100 different sessions already up there. We also run our free Send briefings twice a year to keep everyone up to date with what is going on in the world of SEND. So yeah, have a look on the Sencast website and check it all out. So thank you for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Sencast. It is goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Bye, everyone.